Manager at Rand Swiss. He joins us in the studio now for more on that MPC and a general economic outlook. Viv, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we saw the MPC, keeping the repo rate unchanged. Did we expect this?
Oh yes, most certainly. I mean, before Monday, there was a chance, I would think, that either this time or next time around, rates would have been cut. The round was going at 12:30 at the start of the week, just before, or the first couple hours of the week anyway, before the Pravin Gordhan announcement, and we were heading towards a situation where we saw crop numbers coming in very good. Therefore, food price was coming, food price inflation was under control. The oil price was weaker, just hovering above 50 or so. Those factors should have indicated that we are in a situation, especially with the low growth rate, that indicates, or obviously would justify a rate cut, either this time around or, like I said, the near term. But with this uncertainty at the moment, it's not viable.
I mean, we saw the committee saying that they'd like to see a more sustained improvement in the inflation outlook, before reducing rates. Inflation is expected to return to within the target range of 3 to 6% soon. Is that accurate?
It would have been. I mean, it depends, of course, on the currency. I mean, should we have a Pravin Gordhan firing and so on, and we have the reaction we saw around Renegade, then that blows out of the water. But if we had just looked at the trend in the time leading up to the recall, or it's the country, not the recall of the position, we did see the currency strengthening quite strongly. I mean, we're hitting numbers we hadn't seen for basically a year. 12.30 some change was the number on Monday morning. And if that number had been continuing, yes, most certainly would be back into the range.
I mean, the Rand was doing relatively well. And I want to go back to what you've just said now, just in terms of, the murmurs around a cabinet reshuffle, as well as that recalling by the president saying, Pravin Gordhan should come back home. We saw the Rand suffer there, going down by about 3%. We saw also, I mean, when Nhlanhla was removed as well, how the Rand was affected there. Just take us through what happens to the Rand when situations like these happen. Okay,
let's just say Pravin Gordhan is removed. Possible replacements are people like Brian Molefe. Brian Molefe, even though he's not a Des van Rooyen, because the market, I don't think, valued Des van Rooyen's competence, let alone his integrity, but his competence was also in question because he was basically an unknown. Brian Molefe is, from all accounts, a very competent individual. Unfortunately, the Public Protector's report has really thrown a negative light over his integrity, and the fear is the reason that Pravin Gordhan wants to be, or they want to remove Pravin Gordhan, is because they want somebody in Treasury who will not put a barrier up to some of the more expansive and possibly corrupt deals that are going to be done. And we are talking about some deals on the line right now. For instance, the nuclear power plant, which is the numbers mentioned around like $1 trillion with a T, rands. That puts basically around about a 20,000 rand per person in South Africa, liability if that thing goes through. It's a huge amount of money we're talking about. And the fear is if you don't have someone like Pravin Gordhan in place, that stuff is basically, or that kind of contract is very open to corruption and other negative aspects that could make it much more difficult for us to maintain a credit rating and to maintain our budget stability.
Now, this development is already affecting government debts. I mean, we already spoke about the Rand as well. What needs to be done in the interim to cushion these knock-on effects? And I know it's a little bit tricky. I mean, you've just mentioned, I mean, if something political happens right now, we see the Rand reacting almost immediately.
Oh yes, most certainly. Look, here are the things. I don't know what can be done, but what might happen, because I don't think anyone can actually do this thing themselves. Let's just say there is a strong revolt against the president's move. So if he does go out and decide to basically remove Pravin Gordhan, has been basically announced over the weekend by like places like Bloomberg had said that he had told the SACP, and they confirmed that today, that he wants to remove Pravin Gordhan. And there is a revolt against him, and he is basically either weakened significantly or is removed from power. We would see the Rand strengthen significantly. We would see a great deal more confidence return to the financial markets. If, however, is able to push Pravin Gordhan out and get Brian Molefe or some other semi-compromised or semi-compromised candidate in there, we would see the currency dramatically weaken, and we would see basically probably either an immediate or very short-term move in terms of our credit rating to a downgrade.
I mean, you've just said that the markets generally rally behind Pravin Gordhan because they see him as somebody who's credible but also competent. Now, let's ignore Brian Molefe just for a minute. I know that's the name that's been flying around in terms of a replacement, but who else could be a credible replacement, to Minister Pravin Gordhan in this context, if there even is one?
Look, I don't think Pravin Gordhan has been put in there as a paragon of competence so much. I mean, nobody says he's the world's best finance minister, but what they do believe that he's a generally, as he mentioned, an all-right, reasonably competent and very, the integrity, his integrity is much higher than the other candidates around there. If they can find somebody with that kind of level of integrity, I don't know who the market would justify in that situation, because the reason for the removal of Pravin Gordhan, and this is the argument we put in the papers, and I'm not saying it's my particular argument. The argument in the papers is this. Apparently, President Zuma actually offered to resign early in 2018, a year early, just to have Pravin Gordhan removed. And the thinking is that the reason for Pravin Gordhan to be removed is to have someone in place that can actually push through some more spending that's going to basically make it easier for the president's circle of allies, let us say, to basically get compensated for their support. And so you need to find somebody that almost is against the president in order for the market to consider that person to be competent and have integrity.
So essentially the markets have a problem with the president,
yes,
because it doesn't matter who he picks, they won't be happy.
Yeah, unless it's a pick that's forced him. A pick that he chooses off the bat, like even if it's somebody that has a strong history or whatever, the market will not react to them strongly. I mean, like I said, Brian Molefe, no doubt about competence. It's a question of, is this person perceived by the market to be a stop against what they perceive to be the president's activity in order to basically siphon off funds to his allies. And so anyone that he picks, quite frankly, that is a free pick on his part, would probably be treated with negativity, almost regardless of wherever they came from. If a pick was forced on him, that pick would probably be treated with much more confidence, irrespective of basically what the comparative collocations or even histories are.
Now, just to wrap up, let's look at the saga of Pravin being called back from that investment roadshow. Would you say, him being recalled was sort of a barometer to watch how markets would react, considering that there might be a cabinet reshuffle? So if the rand stays the same, then if we reshuffle him, then it might stay the same. Do you think maybe the president was using it as a way to gauge that reaction? Yeah,
I mean, look, at the point at which Pravin Gordhan was recalled, I mean, literally that day was the strongest day in basically a year or so with regards to the currency. 1230 had been a number we had seen for a long time, and so a weakening from 1230 even by say 4 or 5%, so which is what the market kind of did, really didn't push us too far into like the range that we hadn't seen before. So if you go back 2 or 3 weeks, we were in the 13 level. But that is something I think is just because the market doesn't believe or believes it's enough basically support for Pravin Gordhan that even if the president wants to recall him, he may not be able to. If the market was pretty sure that he's going to be recalled, we would see the currency weaken significantly from here. And I'm saying well past 14, probably even past 15 from here, because the idea would be that the reason for this move so close to the end of the president's term would be just to basically make an all-out kind of move on the treasury and therefore engage in profligate spending and remove a lot of the controls that have been put in place in order to control our deficit.
Viv, it's always great having you here. Thank you so much for your time. That was senior market analyst at Rand Swiss, Viv Govender, joining us for a discussion on that MPC report that came out today, but also just a general economic outlook. More news after the break. Don't go anywhere.